Hi everyone, I'm so excited to have the lovely Jayne here. We've been discussing doing this episode for a while and I'm so happy it's here. And as we always know, it'll just be in perfect timing. So whatever comes up today, whatever Jayne says, whatever I say, there'll be something there. We can intend there's something there for you to take on and that the timing of it is perfect for you, for your business, for everything that we discussed today. So, Jayne, I'm going to just hand it over to you. Can you tell us a bit about you, what you do, your business, why you love your business, and we'll go from there.
So I help brands that help make the world a happier and healthier place to develop and market programs and products that their clients love. And in my other business, I'm one of the co-founders of Tribe of the Tree, and we make flower essences like this little beauty
This one
here,
and this one.
and that one, and the other one, and the other one. And if you're not familiar with flower essences, which I know you are, Cass, but if any of your audience is not familiar with flower essences, they're a kind of herbal medicine that works on energetic and spiritual levels to help create clarity or shift emotions or move through stale energy and set your intentions for something different. So I have two sides to my business and I love both of them equally.
And I love your businesses and I love Tribe of the Tree so much. I've been buying them for myself and for my clients. And my
Thank
clients love
you.
them and I love them and my kids love them. They come in and they go, I need to use my sprays. And they'll choose one. And then we have this thing called Dance and Spray. And I started it when we needed to shift funky energy, post tantrum or pre tantrum even.
Yes.
And we just dance and move our bodies and spray whichever spray. So they'll choose one and it's just beautiful. And my daughter often chooses, she says the purple one, which is the treasure hunter.
Oh,
And
nice.
yeah, and it gives me an insight into their emotions and what they're feeling based on what they choose. So I use it for parenting as well as
I
everything.
love that.
But that's one
I
way I
love
use
that.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great little ritual. And ritual is so important, isn't it, in terms of setting our intentions and shifting our energy. And whether it's a ritual like you're doing in the family or a ritual that we do in our businesses to help us get into the right mindset to do whatever we've got to do with a client or for our marketing, or ritual, habits, routines, all of them have a different place and just a different way of doing things for us. I just love it.
Yes,
Yeah.
same. So, okay, one of the things that we discussed when we were working together, and something that I know is that one of the main pieces of your work is helping small business owners find a really beautiful flow in their marketing, in how they're showing up, in their sales. And I know that's something that, I think every small business owner has experienced this, and this is something that you help everyone with. It's really getting clear on how to discuss what they do, how to do it without so much tension and stress. And also, as you said before on one of our calls, using the superpower of empathy. So can you tell us first, why do you think, from your experience, why do you think so many healers, coaches, creative, wellness practitioners, or small business owners, why do you think they find it so hard to communicate and discuss what they do?
I broadly see four different things going on, and there's a lot of overlap between them, and each of us can experience one or more of them at various different times. So, before we talk about that, though, the first thing is for anyone who is feeling like that, don't think that there's something wrong with you because you're feeling like that. I want to just reassure you that it's a normal rite of passage in business. It's a recurring rite of passage in business. And it happens to all service providers, I believe, unless we're delivering something really tangible that's actually the completion of a task. So if you're a bookkeeper and your job is to help people complete their BAS and do their tax returns and make sure their bills are paid on time, you can tick a box when all those things are done. When you're a healer or a coach or an intuitive reader or are doing some kind of consulting and working in a realm that is relatively esoteric, where the deliverable is not tangible, we can't tick a box and say that is complete, it becomes much, much more difficult to find the right language. And part of it is we don't want to overpromise and commit to something that we later can't deliver on. So there's an element of being scared we'll get it wrong and not following through. That's really common for a lot of people. The other things that tend to happen will be either we are so clear that our work is very intuitive and exploratory and it's a journey, that we don't want to put it in boxes, because to label it might confine it in some way. And that is a really difficult situation when you're trying to communicate clearly, because the human mind uses labels to make sense of the world. You know, every time we meet a product on a supermarket shelf, we're filtering it, going, how does this fit into what I do in my life and whether I need it? How does this fit into the things I know I like the taste of? How does it fit into the things that my family likes to eat? We have a little filtering process. And if you can't find a way to help people filter for you, then they don't know what to do with you, like emotionally, right? Mentally. That's one of the pieces, is that desire to not be constrained. Sometimes we're really wishy-washy because we haven't fully decided exactly what we're going to do. If we haven't developed our offers and our programs, then we can't put them into words for somebody to buy, right? So sometimes it's because, for either reasons of newness in business or not having taken the time yet, we haven't done that deep inner work to work out how we want to present the work to the world. And that is, again, an ongoing iteration that happens, doesn't it, in business? Like, things come up all the time, we change our direction, but if we don't know who our business is, our brand values, our brand purpose, what we're here for, it's really difficult to land on that. So sometimes it's about not having done the work, or tried to do the work and maybe not had the frame of reference or the personal experience or the sounding board to help make it right. Another thing that will really commonly come up for people, and I bet you also see this in your clients, is a fear of either not doing the work justice, feeling like we don't have the credentials to label ourselves as what it is we want to do, or that we're going to get in trouble for it. And that sense of getting in trouble is massive, isn't it? That sense, that sometimes called imposter sense of, who am I to think that I could say this is what I do? And, you know, it's reinforced by what we see from big business, where sometimes I'll be working with some of my corporate clients, because I work with big natural health businesses as well as small business owners. And in the big corporate world, there's a phrase that's used really commonly, which is permission to play. What gives us permission to play in this space? And it's really helpful for us to think about that if you distance it from ourselves and think about it from a big picture point of view, and about brands that we all know. For example, Cadbury has been making chocolate for decades. So when they decided to make chocolate biscuits, it was natural. They had permission to play there. When they decided to make chocolate ice cream, it was natural. They had permission to play there. The consumers acknowledged that they had a right to be in that space and embraced that. If Qantas decided to make biscuits or ice cream, we would all just look at it and go, that's weird, and discount it immediately, right? Yes. So in big business, where you can see how that plays out really easily, in small business, where I might be the only one who thinks about my business at all, apart from the people I'm actually engaged in commerce with, then it gets this very circular, what gives me permission to play translates to, am I good enough?
Yeah.
Can I back this up? Can I follow through on this? So sometimes it's about stepping back and thinking about, why am I the right person to do this work right now with these people? And there's a natural synergy with it as well. And I reckon you always get it right. You just doubt that you get it right. Yeah. So if we were to bring it to my circumstances, I have decades of experience working with brands in the natural health space. I feel I have permission to play here, and it would be very hard for anyone to argue that I don't. if I decided tomorrow that actually my target market now is CEOs of multinational vitamin companies or department stores or bus companies, I don't have permission to play there. I've never been a CEO. I don't really want to be a CEO. I have no credibility in that space. And if I did try to do that, there'd be a dissonance, the opposite of resonance, between what I'm offering and what I have really appropriate credentials for. And I think we often get really caught up in, I haven't done enough, I haven't learned enough, I haven't done all the courses. And sometimes it's about having someone step back with you and say, but you have done all these things, you have experienced all these things, you have worked through all of that. So sometimes it'll be a mental construct, I think, that gets in our way. I bet you see it as well.
So much. And I wrote here, so if anyone's watching the video, you might see me looking down. I'm making notes as Jayne talks so I can like pick up threads later. So I'm not thinking, like holding the thought. I want to like put it down. And as you're speaking about, I think one of the first points of the, you know, like not wanting to put yourself in a box, but also wanting to know what you're doing so you can speak about it cleanly and clearly and calmly. The words pattern seeking dropped in. Like as humans, we look for patterns. And so, and I think when you work for yourself, especially, you want to find the line between like, where can I create, not box myself in, but like help people understand what I do and also be myself and do what I want to do and do it in a way that works for me. So you're not, I feel like there's that area where it all kind of starts to feel like you're getting the best of both. You're speaking in a way that's really clean and clear and not labeling yourself, but still enough that like people understand what you're doing and you can be even more of yourself in the process. So that dropped
in.
And
you know what that reminds me of, Kath, is one of the things that I encounter with my clients all the time is that as small business owners who have huge emotional and spiritual and energetic investment in our work, it's all so tied up with our identities and all of those things. And sometimes we forget that this is my business and this is me. And yes, it's like a Venn diagram, but there's not a complete overlap.
No.
If somebody rejects my coaching in a way that's really woo-woo, that's okay. They're not rejecting me. They just have no need for my work. In the same way that if I need a plumber in the street and I have no leaking taps right now, I'm not going to feel any need to get super engaged with that business, right? So there's definitely that piece about where's the boundary between me and my work, and boundaries are so much woven into all of this, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's so funny you said Venn diagram, because I was going to say that before. I saw a Venn diagram when I was speaking about like, just what I said before, and then I didn't say it and then you said it. Love it. And I was also wanting to go, there's so much to say, but I also wanted to go back for a moment to, I wrote a note here about like feeling like you're over promising or making promises and feeling nervous to make promises, especially when it's an intangible result. And I think so many clients get stressed because there is marketing out there that makes specific promises or even offers to give you your money back if you don't meet a specific outcome, something like that. And I don't market like that. You know, I don't offer refunds. It's like and it's all, you know, my lawyer husband wrote my refund policy. It's all like works well with Australian consumer law, but it's because, you know, it's not up to me to create. Like as the coach, as the service provider, you offer this service and then it's not actually up to you what happens after that, even though you are there with your clients, supporting them, potentially even doing some work for them or with them. But can you tell me more about that over promising, or like what you see, that stress or that fear of like, how do I market myself without making a promise or without over promising? Because I think, sorry, I know I asked a question, now I'm speaking, but there's that piece of like the imposter as well. And I saw this post a few weeks when I can't remember where I saw it, but it was actually someone, and I'd never thought of this, but saying how like there are these women who created the term imposter syndrome. And this woman was kind of noting, like making a comment about how they've kind of pathologized doubt, like a very regular human emotion, into something that women have to now like almost feel like we need to move, like, it's like something else to kind of clear and shift. And I do think women feel it a lot. And also there's that piece of, oh, what if it was also just normal and to have doubt? And what if
Yeah.
that doesn't mean like how you started? What if that doesn't mean there's anything wrong, or that you've done something bad or wrong, or that you don't know what you're doing? And it can just work, you work with it. Like I work with doubt a lot. I've gotten to the point where most of the time it doesn't stop me. And I think
Yeah.
that's the piece. So I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to the question of tell me more about that over-promising, that fear there.
So I think, as you know from your work as well, fear and doubt has a huge energetic charge around it. And so when we get tangled up in our words, trying to talk about what we do while we're navigating that doubt, our words and our writing get very charged and defensive. So the natural response, in my experience, to feeling an energetic charge around something that we're not comfortable with is defensiveness, to close it off so nobody can touch that hot button that is right on the surface. That piece of the charge is really, really vital in creating clear communication. But equally, like you said, doubt and fear is a signpost. And so one of the frameworks that I use with my clients is let's work through what these doubts and fears are and use them as signposts to how we want to set up the values that this business operates under. So if my doubt is that I will overpromise, then I will find a lower level of promise that I am comfortable to make, that is, as you say, about how I will show up with my client, not what my client will experience at the other end of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So, Cassie, if you're feeling fearful around this process, don't worry, I will walk beside you while you work it out.
Yes. Oh, I
Not,
got
Cassie, I
goosebumps.
will wave my magic wand, which I've got my magic wand. I will wave my magic
Oh, love
wand
it.
and your doubt will go away. It's not like that. So the first thing is that we use the doubts to help establish what the values are that we want to stand for. And that can be a very constructive way to reduce their power, take the charge out of them, and to know that you have a very solid framework in place within your business that is incontrovertible and you are never going to go beyond it.
I love it. It's
So,
like taking
yeah,
self-responsibility for how you're showing up. And that also then calls in clients, I think, who have a high level of self-responsibility.
yes,
And it's like, it's even when you are kind of, this is not maybe, it sounds like a random analogy, but if you're upset in a relationship with a friend or something, instead of saying you did this, it's like, I feel this, like you bring it onto you, because as you said, no one can refute that. So you're
yeah,
saying, I love that. It's like, here's how I will show up for you. That's my promise, that this is
yeah.
how I'm going to be in this relationship.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
can use it in lots of different ways. So, in the natural health space, a lot of small business owners are nervous that one day, if they market their business, one day the TGA will come and get them and tell them they've overstepped the mark. And so, what that might mean for them is my value is I value compliance with the regulations. I will stay on top of them and understand what they mean for my business. And I will put every piece of marketing through a little internal process before I publish it and say, is this within the realms of the guidelines I've decided to operate within? Other small business owners will take a completely different approach, but we just need to recognize that the things we're worried about are only coming up for us because they're important to us.
Yeah.
And so ignoring them doesn't make them go away. And it actually probably exaggerates their effect.
And also sometimes it's the ignoring, but then also it can be the shaming yourself for having the worry or the doubt or the fear. And then you
Yeah,
have the shame on top of the emotion. And then you've suppressed the emotion because the shame feels like it's so strong. And then shame creates all other things. There might be procrastination, or just like it can also put us into fight or flight. So you might not
or
do the
freeze.
thing, or freeze or fawn, like all these responses. And it just makes me think of Brene Brown. It's like this, shame is that thing of like, you think you're a bad person because of something. And
You think you're going to be abandoned or rejected because of
yes,
something. And that exclusion from the tribe is very, very scary, right?
yes.
So
especially when you're then actually intending to sell your services to, you know, a community of people. If you feel that you've created that, you've created that exclusion, you've separated yourself, you have so much doubt, like all the stuff that comes with that. And then you add to that the piece of, well, I need to connect with people because A, I want to build those relationships, and B, that those relationships are how I also earn my livelihood. There's just, as you said, like there's so much
Yeah.
intertwined in
Yeah.
it. And no wonder, if we can go back to the initial question of why do you think business owners find it hard to discuss what they do? That's why.
Yeah, that's why it's the combination of the fear, the lack of clarity if we haven't worked through it. It is sometimes, we haven't mentioned this though, sometimes, especially if we work by ourselves, when someone says, "What do you do?" we turn inwards and we think about our process. We think
Yes.
about the tools we use, we think about the training we've had, and we start talking about, I'm a hypnotherapist that works with X brand of process. I work with cognitive behavioral therapy, or I'm a naturopath who works with metabolic balance, dietary changes. Like we return into that internal focus and we think about our process instead of looking outwards and saying, the person who I'm talking to doesn't actually care about my tools. What they're trying to do is put me into a box that helps them to understand how I fit into the world for them.
Mm.
How can I do that in the simplest language I can come up with? And how can I do it in a way that makes sense? So it's, again, sometimes when we have that feeling of being under scrutiny or in the spotlight, it's that sense of turning internal instead of turning our empathy on. And if we can look at all of those messages with empathy as their core, then we will often come up with a better way of phrasing what it
Yes.
is that we're working with. So that's the next piece, I think, is really think about who are you talking to. And, you know, there's some really great marketing and business teachers in the world, especially online. And there is a tendency in those great big programs to try to come up with a formula that is very linear, that
Yes.
will help all the people in the group get from point A, not knowing how to talk about their thing, to point B, being able to rattle it off. And it'll usually go something like, I help holistic health coaches, or insert group of people here, who insert problem solved here, don't know how to build an email database, to create a brand of growing followers so that
Yes.
outcome. And
Yes.
if you've been through one of those programs, maybe that process was really helpful for you, but maybe it felt really constraining or forced or artificial, or maybe it didn't allow you and your work to weave and wander and travel around to get to an outcome that is right. And so sometimes the problem is that we've tried to follow a linear formula for something that's really organic and soft and developmental and wandering, right?
Fully.
So totally think that if you are struggling with that stuff, maybe let go of that need to have one answer for all situations and become a much more empathic and intuitive person in your responses. And when I'm talking to somebody who I know nothing about, paint broad brushstrokes. When I'm talking to somebody who I know is in my world already, either because we work in the same community or we have a connection through a person, then we can get a bit more granular and talk about the nitty gritty. So I think there is an element of feeling like we have to fit our words into a recipe that isn't helping a lot of people. And for some people, it's fantastic. But for some people, it doesn't fit like that. Is
It
that your
also,
experience too?
yes, 100%. And it makes me think of people, like when you think you need the same reflected inside your offer or your program, where you think, I need 10 pillars, or I need this like perfect linear framework. And sometimes, as you said, that is perfect. And depending on the client and where they're at, and maybe there is a process, like depending on what your work is, like let's say my role as a makeup artist, when I do makeup, I'm not going to start with mascara. I'm going to start by cleansing their face and putting on moisturizer. And there is a process, right? So if I went out of my framework, pillars, process, your face, it's not going to look great. But when it comes to coaching, healing, it's not linear. And it's okay if people don't have that, like the pillars where you go A to Z. You might go A, B, J, back to A, like move through. And I think it's beautiful when I see clients being like, these are the elements of my business and my work, and then having that trust and faith within themselves that you're going to move through it as, as a client. You're going to be moving through it in like I always say, you're spiraling upwards. So, and then sometimes we go down a bit and we go back up, but even just not looking for that linearity in how you offer your work as well can be very freeing.
Yeah. And as well, I think when I do work with small business owners who are clear that it's time for them to put some time and invest some energy in some coaching or some consulting or just some personal time around what is my business, what does it stand for, who does it help, what do we sell here, we could create a formula for that and go, well, first I'm going to define my product, and then I'm going to realize who it's for, and then I'm going to work out what we stand for. Or we could start at any point in that circle. At some point, we need all the pieces of that flow to be present in order for anything to move. But there's no rule about where we start.
No.
Start with where we are now and move onwards from there. Business is rarely something with an end point, at least the kind of business that we work with and the kind of work that our clients do. It's not, an end point in most cases. That is, I push this lever and this thing comes out the other end. There's a lot of tendency in the business world for us to talk about things as business as though it's a machine. And we talk about flywheels and engines and levers and funnels and factory style elements. And I want my business to have a heart, not an engine.
Yes.
And I want it to be an ecosystem that I love to live and play in, not a factory where there are inputs and they get churned around and then there's an output. There's still an element of that in a forest, but it's not that mechanistic thing. And so if we try to fit our very organic, nature-based business entities into a very mechanical kind of system, it doesn't necessarily work for us, because in this kind of work, the inner work is just as important as the outer work. And that's how we shift into radiating what it is we want to attract. So there's always got to be a softness to it, right?
I
To me,
love
anyway.
that. I want my business to have a heart, not an engine. I love that so much.
Yeah.
So I know we've touched on this in what we've just said, but how do we do this? How do we get clear on how we want to market so it all flows easily? How do you do this in your business? Like, you're marketing about marketing and you're communicating about communicating. So tell us either how you think we can do it, how you do it in your business. If it's kind of, I guess it flows in and out. It's probably the same, I'm sure. Tell us a bit about that.
So for me, a lot of my business insight comes from my energetic work, my meditation, my connection with the plant energies that we work with in the Tribe of the Tree flower essences. And I feel really blessed that I have that conduit to tuning into the energy of my business and the way the world works in a way that really resonates with me. So often my process will be with meditation or journaling. And I have put together a lovely little self-paced workbook with some journaling prompts and exercises to help people who want to work through that. So if anyone would like to grab that, they're welcome to download it from the resources section on my website, or they can send me thank you. Or they can send me a DM on Facebook or Instagram and we'll shoot it out to you. So there's a handful of different processes that you can explore in there. But the one that I think is really comfortable to start with for a lot of people is to tune into and name those fears that are coming up that are making me feel energetically charged. Am I frightened of something going wrong? And if I am, let's name that fear. And then what happens if I flip it and come up with the mirror image, and how do I sit with that as a value that I choose to abide by in my business?
Ooh, can
And
you give an
will that
example?
dissipate? Yeah, so we talked about the example of overpromising. So maybe what we will say is, let's talk, for example, as though we had a client who is a naturopath and they are concerned about overpromising in the outcome that they will deliver for their clients. Better perhaps will be to say that I will investigate the best researched evidence and make recommendations for you based on the science that we can try together and come up with. So rather than being scared that I will overpromise on something, maybe my value is I will always stay up to date with the research and make sure that I'm relying on the latest possible understanding of how this particular situation should be managed. If we were talking, I like the example that we used earlier, if we were talking about coach who is not interested in giving any kind of guarantees because there are none, then we would potentially use that conversation around, I will walk with you until you don't need me beside you anymore on this part of the journey. So there's different ways that you can do it. One of the things that we have done in the tribe is my business partner Scott and I identified really early in the piece that we felt we had a fear that if we became really tuned into and vocal about sharing energetic messages from the plant spirit, that we would develop really strong egos and become really over the top, kind of limelight hugging, pushy people that didn't sit well with either of us if we allowed that to unravel and got emotionally invested in that kind of limelight seeking piece. And so we made a value in our business of humility and of understanding that we're here to be the spokespeople for the trees. We're not actually the magic behind the medicine, if you like. And so we take that really seriously as a value that we use in our business to value humility and to recognize that and we use that humility in another way as well, which is that we recognize that when we are frightened that we won't do our work justice, the flip side of that for us is humility as well, that we are actually here to support the work. We are not the work.
Yes.
So I like those kinds of flips for people. So that would be a really fun place to start in someone's journaling around the fears that they're working through. I've got some exercises in the workbook around that permission to play piece that we talked about, how can you see the threads of where you do have the credibility, the authority, the right to occupy the space that you are planning to or currently working in. And I find that really helpful too. Yeah.
I love that. Oh, so
you
good.
know, I think language is really important because it's a part of our vibration, right? It's yes, it's partly filtering, but it's also communication, it's connection, and it's also, it has a resonance, it vibrates out into the universe. Like sound just naturally, right? It comes in waves. And so the sounds that we control, the words that we choose are really, really powerful. And if your words aren't resonating with you, then that's a signal in itself that they're not going to resonate with the people you want to attract. And resonance is just something so magical when we get it right. It makes everything else so much easier in relationships, in business, in parenting, everything.
I agree. I agree so much. Love that. So can I ask you, what are
Yeah.
some of your top ways of creating more resonance?
Empathy is right up there.
Okay.
Yeah. So if we really, really, really wanting to create resonance, I haven't thought about this like this before,
Yes, I
Kat,
know,
so
because
I'm really grateful
side
to you for the
note
question.
to everyone, we had
Yeah.
some questions that we were flowing with, but then we
And we're
also
not
agreed
there.
that we would just move with whatever. And this question came, I was like, I have to ask this.
Yeah. So resonance is like an echoing, right? So in a musical sense, if you had a pitchfork and some kind of instrument, when they line up together, the whole world feels different because the sound changes. What we often do with messaging is we think about what's right for us and we don't think about what's resonant for the client, or we think about what's resonant for the client and we don't think about how it lands with us.
Yes.
So empathy is where you will get a very strong connection to who you are communicating with. And sometimes we can just talk, and the thing we're talking about maybe doesn't have much emotional investment in it, and we don't have any charge around how it lands. We don't have any outcome that is going to come from the conversation. Like if you're buying a loaf of bread and you're chatting with the storekeeper, no emotional investment. It's very transactional. When we put a lot of energy into the outcome of our communication is when it's most important to have an empathic connection with somebody. And that's really difficult if you don't know who your client is. And so that's why when we're thinking about who we're in business with, who we're trying to attract into the world of our business, that we want to attract the right people, because otherwise we're going to end up in a situation where we can't deliver on our promise because we're not talking to the right person. So if my marketing started attracting all those CEOs that I'm not really qualified to support, then that would mean that there was a bit disconnect in my messaging. So I always encourage you to think about empathy. And as part of that, as small business owners, part of that empathy has to be directed to ourselves, doesn't it? We have to think about what's the outcome I want as well as what's the outcome I want from my clients. I personally really grate against all the language. I was talking before, I don't like the mechanistic lead magnets and target messages and funnels and engines and all of those things. They grate against me. I don't really have better words to use for a lead magnet than a lead magnet, or a funnel than a funnel. Yeah. And if I did, nobody would know what I was talking about. Right. But what I do know is that what we're really saying in shorthand when we say target market isn't, I'm going to shoot you. What it is really is, this will resonate best with you if you're this kind of person. And so I try to bring it back to that more human flavor. You're not a statistic. You're not just another number on a database. You're a real human person. And how do I want to connect with you on a real human level? And then we find the words to do that.
I love it.
It's often about, especially when we're talking about the intangibles, that concept of reversing the emotional charge that works for us will also work for our client. So if your client's hesitation about working with you is one of wasting money, then we want to talk about how do we maximize your value from this investment. If your client's fear around working with you is, if I open up the floodgates here, my life will go off track, how do we talk about taking a step-by-step process that keeps you safe and allows you to manage one component of this work at a time? And so there's often that flip side, because everything exists on a continuum. And we need to find the starting point and the end point, somewhere between pain and pleasure, that is the right balance for the work that you do and the clients that you have the most to help.
So good. I love it. And there were two things that jumped out while you were speaking about that. So I've written here resonance, and I circled it, and then I wrote empathy, and then I wrote capacity and doubt. Because I think, and we were speaking before we hit record about capacity, which I want to bring up. You said something really cool that I want to bring up. And so I think that what can happen is, what we want to create resonance so that we become a magnet for our clients. And empathy is one way we create that. And I think one way that we maybe create a dissonance, even though we want cognitively and consciously want the resonance, is that we either don't have the energetic capacity for the clients that we're calling in, or we have a lot or any level of self-doubt that feels like it's getting in the way. And again, we want to not shame ourselves for any of this. But we were speaking before we hit record, and you said the words energetic temperature. And so I jotted that down, and I want to speak about that because, as I said to you, I've been speaking to so many clients about the capacity piece, which is when you maybe have actual physical time in your calendar for a client, like in your journal or day plan, you're like, yep, I got space, but energetically, you might not. And then I pulled a card from my beautiful friend, Helen Jacobs, her little sage deck before we started. And I laughed when it came out. If anyone knows Helen, you'll just know, like the card, it was 4 bodies, which is the card speaking to our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual energies or spaces, like and looking after our 4 bodies, which is, I think, a huge piece, not even I think, it's a huge piece of running our businesses and using our voice and using, as you said before, even being a conduit to receiving information from guides, from your business, also from your intuition. And we have to look after ourselves on all of these levels. And the capacity is that more energetic, still sometimes mental, like if there's a heavy mental load or you're going through a big life stuff, transition. But tell me about that, and what capacity and the energetic temperature. Tell me about that.
So, like you, I spent a lot of time thinking about capacity and energetic capacity. So let's start there.
Yes.
It's a subject for another day, but in my work, I have a framework that I work with for businesses, spiritually led businesses in particular, where we talk about it in the same way that naturopaths talk about the triad of health, where the spiritual connection is one part of the triad, the structural framework for another, and the biochemistry and metabolism piece is another. And we can talk about that another day. But in shorthand, the structural component of that, in our bodies, we're talking about muscles and bones, the things that hold the being in a place and allow it to move in a direction and to hold itself stable. In our bodies, that is our infrastructure. We might immediately turn to things like our computer systems, but it's also our processes. And really importantly for spiritual business owners, it's our boundaries. And sometimes in real life, boundaries are things, because they're malleable, that sometimes we will allow to be stretched or we will allow to be broken before we rebuild them. So in many cases, for me in particular, over the years, I've really had to learn that there is a balance between what I can hold for people and what I can hold for myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes if I'm repeatedly being shown that I don't have what feels like energetic capacity for me to hold anymore, that's when I know that I need to go back to my infrastructure and go, where are the boundaries that need to be strengthened? Where is there some technology I can implement that will make this piece of the puzzle easier? Where is my service needing streamlining? Do I still want to offer this service, or is it detracting from my energy in ways that are not conducive to the greater good of my business? So capacity from that perspective, but also in the same way that we emotionally need to process stuff in our business when things happen and we need time out sometimes to do that, we also sometimes need an energetic pause before we can take on more capacity. I have this really clear awareness, especially from my work running the tribe where we talk about energetics all the time, that energetic development as a business owner is something that's a step process, not a straight line. Yeah. So we struggle to the top of the next mountain. Then we stop and we look around and we enjoy the view, and we maybe even sometimes go back down a little way before we come back to that plateau. And then we gather ourselves and we rebuild and we take a deep breath, and then we go to the next level.
Yes.
So sometimes capacity is about just pausing before we build again. I love seeing you nod.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've learned since I used to interview people and be like, yes, yes, and I'm like, Kath, it sounds so annoying as the listener. So I like make myself shush and I just nod because I just can't see like, and even when you watch the recording, you'll probably only see the speaker. I think that's how I'll do it. And so you won't see me nodding until I'm talking, but I am nodding. Just everything Jayne says, I'm like nodding and I'm making notes.
Yeah.
But
And
I
the
love
thing
that
is
piece.
that we can choose how much we're going to carry,
Yes.
right? If capacity is a bucket, we can choose how big a bucket we're going to carry. We can choose whether we carry one or two. We can choose whether we get a third and fourth one on one of those sticks that hangs over our shoulders. We can choose whether we're one of those amazing people who can balance a bucket of water on our head while we climb up the mountain. And we can also acknowledge that sometimes we need to build up our strength before we can take stuff on. So in my own personal business journey, my training is in naturopathy, and I've ended up in marketing, but that's my basis. If I had come straight out of college and taken on a client who was undergoing cancer treatment, I would not have had the capacity for that. That would have been a much bigger leap from newbie naturopath to oncology specialist than I had capacity to take on. That would be something I would have had to build towards before I was comfortable that I could deliver for that client, hold space for that client, understand the mechanisms of the medicines they were taking, the emotional process they were undergoing, and so forth. So the capacity piece is really about what do I have the strength for? And I don't mean that from an emotional perspective, but if I was a carrier of buckets, how many buckets can I carry and how big can they be? And that is kind of how I think of it. We hear all the time people saying, fill your own cup first. And that's one way of thinking about it. But the other thing would be, what would fill my cup? And sometimes it's possible for my cup to be overflowing with good things because I've been too greedy and I want all the things. So capacity is a kind of a process of discernment in many ways. And it's a recognizing that, again, you're a part of this ecosystem that is your business. And for you to be supported and held and to make sure that the bucket that is you hasn't got any holes in it is what it takes to be able to hold space for other people. I think I've mixed too many metaphors there.
No, I love it. I get it. I love it. And I think, I often say to clients, like, after you've had a big growth spurt or like moved through something big in your business, there is this period of integrating and recalibrating at that level.
Yes.
And so that really speaks also to what you said, almost like this, like a staircase or a step laddering that growth and building your capacity with gentleness and to, like what you said before, like with the kind of slowness, like you can't rush this.
You said something in your newsletter this week that I had also been working through in my meditation. And it was something about reorganizing energy threads in your business.
Yes.
Can you remind us what you said?
Yes. So actually last week and this week, so I always duplicate last week's newsletter and then just delete it or edit, whatever. And so last week I was speaking about energetic. There'd been a week where every client session, every client call in the mastermind, we were doing this energetic reorganizing or restructuring. And I said how much I love that. And sometimes it was actual calendar reorganizing or a client coming to me and saying, I don't have enough time to do this. And we would, be like, let's lay out your actual week, because you can create that space and that time a lot of the time, not always. And we would do that. And we did it in so many ways. And then this week I deleted my Elevate Vitality, my original business name, the URL, like I didn't renew it. I've been renewing it year on year, the .com.au and the .com, and then they were both redirecting to Mendoza-Jones.com. And I deleted my old Gmail accounts. I hadn't even realized, I knew I was paying for them, but I hadn't realized I was paying for 3. I was paying for Cassie at Elevate Vitality, Hello at Elevate, and Support at Elevate. I don't know why I even had 3 accounts. Anyway, it's a whole thing of like reorganizing, restructuring by deleting and releasing and letting that go. So I had kept that sentence in from last week and tweaked it, said, as I said last week, I love this, as you said, energetic reorganizing. And that created so much space, and even a client or like
Capacity.
so much capacity. And I was speaking to someone on Instagram because I posted a story about it, and she even said, she might be listening to this episode now, and she was like, I can feel the space that's created, because I said it's made so much space. She goes, I can feel that for you. So
Yeah.
to your point, and also to what I say, and like literally the name of this podcast is Love What You Create, because you have to love what you're doing first. Your clients can feel your capacity on an unconscious, sometimes conscious, as this person, this beautiful woman said to me, I can feel it, but it's also often very unconscious. It's that energetic resonance, which is
Yeah.
why sometimes all the doing isn't creating the results you want, because it's actually needing to do the inner work, change your energetic, like your beingness, and then that creates the result
Yes.
that you want.
Yes. So much. So in my meditation and work in the last same period probably that you're talking about, we've been really thinking about reassortment of the energy. How do we direct energy that's currently going in one place into a place that's better aligned with where I want to go? And part of that has definitely been about finishing unfinished jobs, some of which are tiny and would seem inconsequential to anybody, but are meaningful to me, and I want to complete them. Some of which felt really important once, and on reflection are no longer relevant, that can just be dropped. And that reassortment and redirection and refocusing that comes with that letting go of stuff or moving through it or finally allowing it to be a priority, I think it's a massive capacity builder. You might need to pause to get to that.
Yes.
But it's a massive capacity builder. It's that sense that, if there are streams of energy coming out of us, how many of them are going in a intentional, or I want to say resonant again, direction, and how many of them are dead ends to nowhere that just wave around like sea anemones and just make waves around your head that distract you while you're trying to focus.
Yes. Oh, I just saw I saw that in my head. And it reminds me of this. I wrote about this somewhere, and I can't remember where I initially got this idea from, but it's almost like if your thoughts and your energy were creating fruit on a tree, what would the fruit look like or be like? Would it be these plump, juicy, red, beautiful apples? Would it be small little fruit that's like not really ripening? Would there just be like a lot of would the fruits just be falling off and flying through the wind or dropping to the ground? And again, not to shame what comes through, but it's like, and also not to shame just normal human emotions of doubt or fear or whatever it is, and not to use that against, oh, I'm having a fearful thought, that must mean that there's just worms all through my apples on the tree. But it's actually just having that connection with, what is my energy? What are my thoughts? What are my beliefs? How is this affecting what I'm producing, what I'm creating, how I'm marketing, my level of empathy, my clarity around this, and then what I'm creating and calling in as a result of that.
Yeah, I think that little visualization you just described is a perfect way for someone to take the energetic temperature for themselves, isn't it? Of tune
Yes.
in, if my business were a tree, and I often think about my business as a tree,
Yes.
which we can talk about again another time, but what would it be producing right now? And also, what stage of growth is it at right now? Because if we want to talk about energetic capacity, and my tree feels like a sapling that is knee high, it's not going to have capacity to house ruby grapefruit, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have capacity for that. That is beyond its capacity right now. It might have the capacity for cherry tomatoes, and they would be juicy and plump and vibrant and tasty, but they're different in shape and weight and energy requirement, because capacity is literally, do I have the resources to fulfill on this thing? If we were
Yes.
talking about a factory, which we all know now that I don't like thinking of business as factories, but some businesses actually are factories. You need to have certain resources. You need to have the ruby grapefruit that's going to make the marmalade. You need to have the sugar to go into the marmalade. You need to have the people to stir the pot. You need to have the power turned on to cook the jam. So all of those resources dictate capacity. And if you have a glut of ruby grapefruit and only one pot for it to be cooked in, the ruby grapefruit will spoil before the cooking gets done.
Yes.
If so, we need to think about the capacity. And, I talk a little bit about how biochemistry and metabolism works in business. And that's about being able to take in input, whether from a client or from spirit or from yourself, and turn them into something of value before you share it with the world. And so if you think about even the contents of your fridge and what you have capacity to create in the kitchen right now, it will vary according to how much is in the fridge, or
Yes.
whether you have time to drop everything right now and go to the shop. So that emotional capacity is not just about space, but also about skill and capability. It's about resources, it's about time. There's many different angles that go into what gives you the ability to create right now.
Yes. And
Yeah.
again, if you're saying, I want the ruby grapefruit, I want to create the grapefruit, I want the grapefruit, but you only have capacity in that season of your life. And again, not again, but I haven't said this yet. Everything's impermanent, everything's going to change. So you can change this. But if you want the grapefruit, and right now you've got capacity for cherry tomatoes, but you don't see that, and you don't get the grapefruit because you don't have the
You're going to break the
capacity,
tree.
you're going to break also your brain and your heart, and like you're going to break the tree. You're going to have so much potential shame, or like, oh, I coulda, woulda, shoulda. This is when comparison comes in. So and so has the grapefruit. Why can't I have the grapefruit? I do all the I'm in the soil. I also have water and sunlight and nutrients. Why can't I grow a grapefruit? And then all this stuff, and then we spend all that time and energy trying to clear the emotional stuff that came out of just not recognizing, wait, in this moment, I don't have the capacity. I'm going to honor that. I'm not going to wrong or shame myself for it. I'm going to pause here. Look again, like, as you said, read your energetic temperature, check your cup, check your, like all the leaves, all the flowers, or the fruit on your trees, make changes if you need, have a nap if you need, and then start to make tracks towards the grapefruit that you want without wronging yourself. And also while celebrating that you've grown a whole cherry tomato, like it's still amazing.
The other thing as well is that capacity is something we build. It's not something we're born with, right?
Yes.
The factory that makes the ruby grapefruit marmalade, didn't just pop up out of the sky one day.
Yes.
It was built purposefully to have the capacity to do that task. And the same thing can apply in our businesses. And often what we see happening is we focus on building capacity at the expense of producing anything along the way to building capacity, or we think that we need all this capacity and we end up paying for all this capacity if it's a investment before we have the ability to use it. So sometimes we're better off to say, the capacity I have right now is this. What can I produce out of this capacity? And if all I can produce right now is a nap, then that is going to be perfect for my business as an output, because it generates a more rested and balanced person in the driving seat. If what I can produce in my business right now is one-on-one client work that goes deep, that has just as much value as 5,500 people in a room that goes surface level. And so finding the value from what we have capacity for is really important for helping us to feel aligned, I reckon.
Yes, I love it. So tell me about Tribe of the Tree, your beautiful energetic business. And I mean, as you know, I've been using the essences and sprays myself and with my clients and in my business, like in group balances and on group calls. And I love them. And I have some like extra ones just you can't see, but like in my cupboard here. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I run the business with my friend Scott. We've been friends for a very long time, and we've been making flower essences together for about a decade. And we have a range of 15 flower essences and 8 flower essence mists in our product range. And one of the things that we love about the work that we get to do is that we are helping people to tap into what's in alignment for them, how they can have their best experience in the world, where they want to go. And we're very blessed to have some clear guidance from the plants that are involved in the medicines. We feel like we were invited to participate in the work, and it feels like a huge honor to be invited to do that. And that means that we've been also given very clear guidance about how we should present them to the world. And one of the things that we're really intentional about is that the plants would like to help people to look forward to where they want to go and not to dwell on the past. And so we have a
Oh, I love
very,
that.
yeah, it's a very tight group of remedies that we may expand it in the future, but where it sits right now, it's all very forward facing, intention setting, and clarity promoting. So one of our business values is that awareness has healing purposes. Awareness and insight has healing purposes. So in the same way that I was saying that I really encourage people to look at where they're finding something fearful and use that introspection to find a way to flip it and to decide what they want to work towards rather than what they're wanting to get away from. We have that very same focus in all our work with the tribe. So our essences have lots of different applications, from shock absorber for helping you to move from being in an ungrounded, panicked, or stressed out state into a state in which you feel comfortable in the world and grounded and solid in yourself, to destiny calls, which is a real favorite among people like us who are spiritually led business owners, that helps us to recognize that being in small business is a state of becoming the person who can do what it is that we feel called to do. We have pure potential, which I think you and I talked about this morning, for helping us to understand what we need to do to create capacity within ourselves to reach our highest, longest term plans and visions for ourselves, all sorts of different stuff.
So
And
beautiful.
we just love them. So available directly from us or from a few health food stores and practitioners around Australia. And we would love anyone who wants to learn more about them to get in touch or to check out our website.
Oh, I love them. So when I gift them to clients, and I've been gifting them in the mastermind, I will muscle test which remedy a client needs based on just either their journey in the mastermind or their energetic state just at almost the time of testing. And yeah, I just love that it's obviously part of the kinesiology testing, but also part of the tribe of the tree energy has been like, this is what this person needs.
Yeah.
And it comes through so strongly, and it just gets wrapped up and sent off in the gift pack. And I just love that there's that energetic support sitting on their desk, ready for them whenever they need it. So
Yeah.
good.
Yes.
So is there anything to close out that you would love to, anything I haven't asked you, anything you want to say or clarify, or just leave our listeners with? And obviously to everyone listening, I'll pop all of your links and everything in the show notes.
Thanks,
But just anything that you want to finish with.
I want to bring the circle back right to where we started,
Yes.
which is that if this is something that is tough for you, don't get down on yourself about it.
Yeah.
Because, just know it was never, ever meant to be an exercise that was completed in 15 minutes.
Yes.
And if we were doing this with one of my big corporate clients, we would have a whole team of people in a room, probably for half a day or a day, multiple times, before we got the kernel of truth at the center of everything. So it's okay if it takes you years and years and years to arrive at how I'm going to describe what I do. What we want to encourage is that you find a way to feel like you're moving closer, and that we find a way for you to step past any emotional charge that comes up around it. And so that's where I encourage you to put your energy, is don't sweat on the words, which are very intellectual pursuit. Sit with the feelings and start there. And you and I are both of the same philosophy, aren't we? That the inner work precedes the outer work. And in this case, the inner knowing precedes the right vibration in the form of words that we're going to communicate with other people.
Yeah.
Take your time, allow it to breathe, sit with it, let it sift and filter, and see where you land with it.
Oh, I love it. So good. So I'm so excited to just A, share this with everyone, and B, pop your links in the show notes so everyone can just go and have a look at your beautiful work and your beautiful website that I know you've been working so like deeply on to just make sure it is resonating with your clients and, you know, emitting or radiating the qualities and the frequencies of your energy and your beautiful work. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
coming on the podcast and sharing this so beautifully. I've literally written 4 pages of notes. And so they'll be peppered throughout the show notes. I pretty much just wrote the show notes, I guess. So future casts will be thrilled. I mean, I will condense it because no one needs 4 pages of show notes, but I'm very excited just for what I've written here and just to share this with everyone. And I just know I'm going to speak for everyone listening. I just know people are going to get so much, or have, now they listen to this, have received so much from this conversation. So thank you, Jayne.
Thank
And
you, Kaz. Thank you,
thank
everyone, for
you.
listening. And Kaz, I have received so much from it too. It's been a while since I've had a chat like this about grapefruits and cherry tomatoes,
Yes.
and I can see myself using that analogy for many years to come.
Very good. I love
Yeah,
it.
I love it too. Thank you for being you.
Thank you.